So we were talking at one point about the origins of the Tonglen practice, and this book, In Praise of Great Compassion, says the origin is a verse from Nagarjuna's text, Precious Garland, which says, may their ill deeds ripen upon me, and all my virtues ripen upon them. But Venerable Ngawan found in another book, this is a book by Shantideva, called The Training Anthology, Shiksha Samuchaya. And in here, there's a quotation from a sutra called the Vajra Vajra Flag, Vajra Flag Sutra. I tried to find it online, but looks like there isn't a translation of it. But in this sutra, there's it's quite a long quotation, but it's talking about basically a bodhisattva's attitude of being totally dedicated to the welfare of others. So a couple of quotations from this sutra. One says, as for the mass of suffering and the various distorting actions that all sentient beings have produced, those distorting actions because of which they do not see the Buddhas, do not hear the Dharma, and do not know the religious community, the Sangha, with my own body I will accept that mass of suffering heaped up by three kinds of distorting actions. So that's talking about taking on suffering, all the suffering of sentient beings, and the actions, the mistaken actions they do. So there's other quotations about that. And then here's one quotation about giving one's own virtue to others. So he's talking about all the virtue that I create and so on. And then he says, the way in which I should dedicate this wholesome action is in such a way that all sentient beings will obtain limitless happiness, happiness they have never felt before, and so on, up to the happiness of complete knowing. So it seems that quotation from that sutra, the footnote says, it could be regarded as an ancestral source of what would become the Tibetan Buddhist practice of taking and sending. So it's nice to know that the origins are going back all the way to the sutras. Okay, so I'd like to now start looking at this text, the Dream Tale by Nagarjuna. So okay. So the full title is Tale of the Wish-Fulfilling Dream. And you don't have to copy this because there is a file that was sent to you, or if you haven't received it yet, you can get it. It contains notes from this course plus this text. So the author of this text is Nagarjuna, and it seems there's not a lot of information about his life. It's very sketchy, but it's considered he lived in around the 2nd or 3rd centuries, Common Era, so several hundred centuries after the Buddha. And he was Indian, born in India, and he was a monk. And there's stories about him, but scholars are skeptical about some of the stories. Tibetans, tend to believe these stories, but for people in the modern world, they may sound a little more like myths. Because one of the stories is that he traveled to the land of the Nagas. So in Buddhist cosmology, there's a type of being called a Naga that they're kind of like animals, but it seems they're very intelligent. They have intelligent minds, but they're said to, some of them live in water, like in the sea or other bodies of water. Some may live at the base of trees. So they're kind of a little bit like snakes and or sea creatures. I remember seeing in one temple in Nepal, on the entrance to the temple, carvings, and there were these kind of creatures. I think they were meant to be Nagas, but they look like mermaids. Are there also mermen? There's mermen and mermaids. Okay, so they're, the bottom part of their body is like a fish, and the upper part of their body is like a human. So we have these in Western cultures. I don't know where they come from, Greek mythology or Roman, but you know, and yeah, so there's these stories about mermaids and mermen. So the Nagas, these particular images looked similar to that. So anyway, why he went to the land of the Nagas is because some of the Mahayana sutras that were taught by the Buddha, especially the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, the Prajnaparamita sutras, were apparently taken by the Nagas to their land for safekeeping in order to protect them from being lost or harmed or whatever. And so Nagarjuna went to their land and brought these sutras back into our world. So I think that's the origin of his name, Nagarjuna. And if you look at, I don't know if they're on that picture, but sometimes, yeah, he's depicted with snakes coming around his head. So there's some kind of connection with these Naga creatures. But anyway, he's mainly known for his writings. He wrote a number of texts, and mainly he wrote texts about Madhyamaka. So he's considered the founder of the Madhyamaka, or the middle way school of philosophy, which teaches emptiness based on the Buddha's sutras, especially the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So it isn't that Nagarjuna just invented this notion, but rather he was interpreting, explaining what the Buddha taught in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So it was really the Buddha who taught emptiness, but just reading the Buddha's words was difficult to understand. So Nagarjuna wrote these texts to explain it. But then reading Nagarjuna's words is also difficult to understand. So other commentaries were needed to unravel what Nagarjuna was saying, because actually Nagarjuna is sometimes accused of being a nihilist, because, you know, it sounds like he's saying nothing exists. Some contemporary scholars accuse him of that he's a nihilist. But Chandrakirti, Lama Tsongkhapa, and other masters explain what Nagarjuna was talking about and point out he was not a nihilist. Nihilist? What's the right way of saying that? Nihilist? A nihilist. He's refuting inherent existence, a certain mode of existence that we tend to falsely impute onto things. So that's what he's refuting, not existence itself. But it's a really difficult point to understand. So we need lots of commentaries to be able to understand it. So anyway, this is a little text that was translated by Geshe-ma Kelsung Wangmo, German nun, first nun to become a Geshe, to get the Geshe degree. And yeah, so I haven't had teachings on this text. There were teachings given, and we have some recordings of them. They were given by Geshe Tupten Pelsang, who was a teacher of Geshe-ma Kelsung Wangmo, and she translated his teachings. And I wanted to listen to them, but I just didn't have the time. So But still, I thought it would be nice to read through the text together. And some of the verses are included in Volume 5 in Praise of Great Compassion. And that text, that book does contain some explanation, some commentary to them. I'm not sure if it's from His Holiness, the commentary, or from Geshe Thupten Palsung. So I'll share that with you. And then for the other verses that are not found in Volume 5, I'll just make a guess what they're talking about. And if other people have ideas, thoughts about the meaning, you can share those as well. So he starts off, usually Buddhist texts start with some expression of homage or praise, prostration. So here he says, I bow to the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then he says, since it is that which they achieve, it is like a dream. Bodhisattvas accomplish that aspect. So I'm not sure what he's talking about here, but my guess is that he's talking about enlightenment. Bodhisattvas have the wish to achieve enlightenment, and it's, in that sense, it's like a dream, maybe. They dream about attaining enlightenment, and they accomplish that. So I think that's what he's talking about, but I don't really know for sure. But then the second two lines of that verse says, in order to benefit samsaric beings, I will teach a few methods for growing fond of sentient beings. Yeah, so to be able to benefit others, then we need to develop this attitude of fondness, of endearment, of affection, of caring, as we've been seeing, especially that first method for developing bodhicitta, where we need to develop that quality of caring about others, which then becomes a cause for compassion when we observe their suffering. So these last two lines of this verse seem to be like a promise of what he's going to explain. This is often, again, a feature in texts written by Tibetan and Indian masters. Right at the beginning, they make some kind of, like they call it a promise to compose. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to talk about. This is what I'm going to explain. And then the next 5 verses give reasons why it is necessary to generate love for all sentient beings. So 5 reasons for being able to have this attitude of fondness and affection and love for sentient beings. So the first reason, which is in verse number 2, is because we and all sentient beings are equal in wanting happiness and not suffering. So that's the reason given in this verse. So the verse says, I and all sentient beings are equal with regard to happiness and suffering. Being equal with regard to happiness and suffering, we are family. So it is not right to completely abandon these beings and enter nirvana. So this is what we encountered before, especially in the step of equalizing self and others. That's the main point to contemplate there, is just to contemplate how myself and everyone else, all sentient beings, want happiness and don't want suffering. And it seems kind of obvious and, nothing terribly profound about that. But when we do contemplate it, it really does have quite a profound effect on our mind. And in one of Jeffrey Hopkins' books, I don't remember the name of it, but it's actually about cultivating love and compassion and bodhicitta. And he talks a lot about his own experiences in like the early part of his life. He was kind of a tough kid and did lots of naughty things. And then, how he began the studying with his teachers. And his first teacher Geshe, what's his name? Geshe Wangyal? Geshe Wangyal. He's actually a Mongolian Lama who lived over in New Jersey. And so he met that teacher and started, actually I think he stayed with him, lived in the house with him. And the first practice that his teacher taught him was that one, meditating on how all sentient beings are the same and wanting happiness and not suffering. And he said he would sometimes stay up all night, like all night he would meditate on that. And he'd go back to the beginning of his life and think about all the people that he knew, starting with his mom and dad and brothers and, family members, and then friends, and then teachers. And he just kind of go through his life thinking one by one of all the people he'd ever known, and then doing this contemplation. This person is just like me. They want to be happy and not suffer. And I thought, wow, that would be quite amazing. I've never tried that, but you could certainly spend hours or even the whole night contemplating that, right up to the present, and then thinking about the people, like your neighbors and people you meet and so on. So I thought that would be a really profound way of affecting your mind, changing your mind towards others. So that's one way of doing it. And it's also helpful to think of specific examples, just as I like when people are nice to me, people treat me in a friendly way, they smile at me, they're respectful to me, and, considerate of me, and so on. So just, when people treat me that way, I really like it. I feel really good. I feel really happy. Well, how do you think other people feel? How do they like to be treated? So contemplating that then can help us to behave in that way towards others. Others like to be treated that way too. And then just as I don't want pain, when there's pain and discomfort, being hot, being cold, hungry, and so on, tired. So just as those kind of experiences are unpleasant for me, then it's the same with others. Others also are unhappy and find those experiences unpleasant, and so on. So, bring to mind specific examples. And volume 5, when talking about this verse, also mentions some examples. So it says, think about others' difficulties and what it would be like to have them. To be a refugee, to be poverty-stricken or terminally ill, to have a disability or chronic pain, to face the death of your child, to be oppressed or constantly having to face racism or gender discrimination, and so on. Imagine being left on your own to face these problems, and contemplate how strong your wish to receive help, or at least understanding and empathy, would be. Remember times when you have faced trying experiences and how relieved you were when someone stepped up to help you. Think that that's how others would feel if you reached out to them. And then, just as you are joyful when you're able to accomplish your goals, so are others. Just as you feel supported when others show appreciation for your talents and contributions, so do others. Since beginningless time in samsara, we've been desperately searching for lasting happiness and for meaning in our lives, but haven't been successful. We already know this, but we forget it. So as we repeatedly familiarize ourselves with these points, they will arise more frequently in our mind. Then when we encounter situations that require help, we won't hesitate to give it. So again, as we've been talking about the last couple of days, we have this habit of regarding ourselves as more important than others. And it really is a habit, and habits can be changed. So, for example, you might notice that when you get praised, when people say nice things to you, you feel really happy. But when somebody else is praised, do you feel the same way? I don't. Yeah. But why not? Yeah. Why shouldn't we be happy when someone else gets praised? It's the same words, same, maybe it's even the same person saying the same words, but they're directed at somebody else and not at me. Why shouldn't we be happy about that? So I think it's just a habit. Yeah, the habit of thinking I am more important. I'm the one who should get all the good things, and I'm the one that shouldn't have to experience any problems, any bad things. So we can change that habit. It's just a question of working at it. I mean, of course, we need to recognize this habit and recognize it's not helpful, and especially for our spiritual practice, our spiritual development, for the goals we want to reach. And then make a conscious effort. When we hear somebody else being praised, somebody else gets some wonderful gift, some prize or whatever, instead of feeling jealous, feel happy. That's actually the practice. One of the four measurables is the measurable joy. And there's different ways of practicing immeasurable joy, but one way is being happy for others' happiness, being happy when other people have good experiences, get praised, win prizes, get promotions, and so on and so forth. You know, just like we like those things, that makes us happy. Well, the same is true for others. Why shouldn't we be happy for them? We do sometimes. Sometimes it does arise naturally, especially if you're a parent and something wonderful happens to your child. You're really happy for them. So if we really love someone, care about someone, want that person to be happy, we do share in their happiness. But we can train ourselves to feel that way, not just for a small, limited number of people, but for more and more and more people. It does take some effort, but it's worthwhile, because if we can share in others' joy, that means we feel joyful too. It's kind of an easy way to feel happy. It's like hitching a ride on somebody else's happiness. So making a practice of that means, we can find lots of causes for happiness, just thinking about other people's happiness. And it's also practice when you see people doing good things, feeling happy for them, rejoicing in what they're doing. So that's also part of this practice of joy. And then, it talks about being family. Yeah. So that's kind of nice as well, to think we're all one big family. Dalai Lama often talks about that. The human beings on this planet, we're all one family, brothers and sisters. So that's also a nice idea to cultivate and feel closer to others. And the last two lines say, so it is not right to completely abandon these beings and enter nirvana. So just as it wouldn't feel right to abandon our family and leave them behind in a miserable situation and just free ourselves, that wouldn't feel good. We wouldn't be happy about that. So if we do cultivate this sense of all sentient beings and myself being one family, then that helps us feel strongly that I have to help them. I have to help them get out of samsara, and not just myself. Okay, so then the second reason for cultivating kindness, love, affection for others is that it's important and possible to love other sentient beings because we have gone through the same experiences in samsara repeatedly. This common experience brings us close to each other. So the verse says, Together with these beings, I experienced the sufferings of the lower realms and all sorts of happiness of the higher realms. Since we dwelt as one, I am fond of them. So this takes into account rebirth, reincarnation. And according to Buddhism, we have lived countless times. We have had countless past lives. And in some of our past lives, we were in unfortunate situations, lower realms, which are the animal realm, hell realm, and hungry ghost realm. So those three realms involve a lot of suffering, really horrible, miserable situations. So we've been in those places and experienced those things. We've also been in the upper realms, human, and also the Deva realms. There's many Deva realms with higher and higher degrees of happiness and pleasure and bliss. So Buddhism says there's no place in samsara we haven't been. There's nothing new in samsara. We've been there, done that countless times. No place we haven't gone, no experience we haven't had. Although we don't remember, most of us don't remember that, but this is what the Buddha said, so you can think about that. And the same is true for everybody else. Every other sentient being has also had countless rebirths in samsara, sometimes in the lower realms with a lot of suffering, sometimes in the upper realms with a lot of pleasure and happiness. So we've all had the same experiences in samsara, both pleasurable and miserable. And so again, that's a way to feel closer to others, because when, with our family or friends, when we go through certain experiences together, like, going on a holiday and having a great time, or going through some tragedy or some dangerous situation. So when we have situations like that, where we are experiencing it together with other people, it kind of makes us feel close. Have you ever noticed that? You feel really close to those people because of those shared experiences, both good and bad. So I think that Nagarjuna is addressing that kind of dynamic in this verse. He's saying, myself and everybody else, we've all been in this big soup of samsara. Sometimes having great times, sometimes having horrible times, but we've experienced all these things together. So it's as though, again, like we're family, we're very close. So this engenders a feeling of closeness and familiarity rather than us and them, or me and them, like we're totally distant, totally cut off. So volume 2 says, the feeling of familiarity, I can't be saying that, volume 5, in Praise of Great Compassion says, the feeling of familiarity opens the door to feeling fondness for others. They helped me when I needed caring companions or even strangers to reach out and give me a hand. Now that my situation is better, I have the responsibility to help them. It wouldn't be right for me to abandon them and enter nirvana myself. So that's another reason to contemplate, to have a feeling of fondness, closeness with sentient beings. The next verse, verse 4, is another reason, a third reason for feeling fond of others. And this is talking about how we've all been each other's parents and children. So it says, not just once did I reside in every womb, nor is there a single sentient being who did not reside in my womb. Therefore, we are all family. So we've already looked at the idea that everybody has been my mother, and that means I've been in their womb and was born from them. But this also points out one that isn't normally talked about, but it must be true as well. In fact, it was in that quotation from the Buddha. He said, everyone has been our son and daughter. So I like thinking about that too, because if we are a parent to a child, we really love that child. There's this incredible feeling of love and closeness, endearment and caring. And so you try to, get in touch with that feeling and think we've had that feeling for every sentient being. We have given birth, we've been the mother and the father for every other sentient being. They've been a really dear, beloved child. And so we had that connection in the past, an incredible, close, loving connection with others. And that's the kind of feeling that we are trying to generate now towards every sentient being, like that of a mother for her child. That's also quite a powerful point to contemplate. And again, get the sense of us being all one big family. So the book In Praise of Compassion says, this verse and the previous verse rely on the notion of rebirth. If you have accepted the notion of rebirth, or are at least open to it, it is not difficult to think that we have all been one another's relatives in previous lives and will be family in future lives as well. If rebirth is still difficult to imagine, so if you still have problems accepting rebirth, it's fine to set it aside for the time being and come back to it later. And you could also look into reasons given in the Buddhist teachings supportive of the idea of rebirth and reincarnation, and other resources like people who remember past lives and so on, to help you open your mind more to rebirth. And then for those who accept rebirth, think that all sentient beings have been your parents and children numerous times. Since you change bodies in each birth, you don't recognize each other, but the connection is still there. If you were to remember your previous relatives, and in the future, when you develop the super knowledges, you will. So part of the path involves developing single-pointed concentration, calm abiding, and then on the basis of that, one can also develop what are called the super knowledges. There's 6 of those, and one of them is being able to remember your past lives. So, and for some people that just comes kind of naturally and spontaneously, memories of past lives. So if you do develop that quality, then you will remember. You'll have your own direct memory of your connections with other beings. And when you have that, the feeling of closeness and affection you had for them will arise again. So if we could remember how we've been each other's parents and children, that feeling that we had of loving them and caring for them and being close to them will arise. And given our long and deep connections, it's only fitting that I wish all these beings to have happiness and its causes. And then he says, the self-grasping ignorance spawns the feeling of being an isolated, independent individual, when in fact we are dependent on and interrelated with everyone else. If there's a person you find despicable now, remember that they haven't always been that person. They are conditioned beings, and as the external and internal conditioning changes, so do their personalities, beliefs, and actions. Remember that we are in the nature of impermanence. So you have loved people you may not be fond of now, and you will be close to and fond of them again in the future. So that's something to think about with somebody we find despicable. Because of their present behavior and attitudes and so on, then we dislike them. But if we think they haven't always been like that, they haven't always had that body and that personality and that behavior, but in previous lives we've known that person. They've been our mother, they've been our father, our brother, our sister, our child, our friend, our spouse, and so on. So we've had, in different circumstances, very positive, loving relationships with that person. We just don't remember. But if we could, then I think our feelings for that person would change. And the same in the future. In the future, we will meet that person again in nice circumstances and have very close relations with them. And then the book points out some doubts we might have. Someone could say, if all sentient beings have been my parents, then I've also been their parents. So shouldn't they appreciate me for my kindness? And then someone may also say, if others have been kind to me in countless previous lives, they've also harmed me countless times too. So why should I try to benefit them now? Although there may be some truth to these statements, thinking like this benefits neither ourselves nor others. So it's not useful to let our mind get carried away with those thoughts. Remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to cultivate positive thoughts, positive feelings, and altruism, wanting to help others. So thinking thoughts like that, even though they may be true, it's just not beneficial. And His Holiness says, it only stimulates thoughts of revenge and resentment that create more turbulence and unhappiness in our mind and motivate destructive actions. On the other hand, reflecting on our close and endearing relationships with others stimulates thoughts of kindness and love and leads to harmony and virtuous actions. So there's a purpose, a reason for focusing on specific aspects of our relationships with others in the past. When we adopt a positive perspective on others, we have many opportunities to be happy. When we hold critical, judgmental view, unhappiness follows us wherever we go. So, do you think that's true? I mean, we can certainly focus on all the faults of others and think about all the harmful things they're doing and get obsessed with that. But what good does that do anybody? So you can do that if you want, but it's your choice. Do you want to be happy or do you want to be miserable? Okay, then the next verse presents the fourth reason for having fondness for others. And this involves thinking about how the Buddha relates to other beings. So the Buddha purified his mind and accumulated merit for a long time because he cherished all sentient beings and sought full awakening so he could benefit them most effectively. Since I have respect and devotion to the Buddha, and he sees sentient beings as being so precious, I should too. So that's the commentary. And then the verse itself, number 5, says, further, I am fond of the Buddha, as he worked hard for the sake of these sentient beings for a very long time. That too makes me fond of sentient beings. So an analogy to this is if we have friends, let's say we have a couple who are parents and have some children, and we are friends with the parents, and the parents love their children dearly. Their children are incredibly important and precious to the parents. And so if we treat the children well, the parents will be happy with us. But on the other hand, if we're nasty to the kids and mistreat them and insult them and so on, the parents aren't going to be very happy with us. So it's kind of similar. If we respect the Buddha and want to have, a good connection with the Buddha, and if we think that the Buddha, from the Buddha's point of view, every single sentient being is like their child. They have nothing but love and compassion and affection, and they're totally dedicated to helping them. So that's how the Buddha views all sentient beings, even the ones we find despicable. We can't stand. But from the Buddha's point of view, they are wonderful and beautiful and objects of love and compassion. And so if we think in that way, that can help us to, overcome our negative feelings towards certain sentient beings and, work on cultivating positive feelings. So I find this particular, it comes up in Shantideva too, I think. I forget which chapter, but Shantideva talks about that. Yeah, I think it's in chapter 6. It's a technique, a method for overcoming anger and aversion. So there's some person there that we don't like and we feel a lot of anger and aversion for them. And then we think, how does that person appear to the Buddha? How does the Buddha view and feel towards that person? And we don't know, but they do say in the teachings, the Buddha has no anger, no animosity, no negative feelings at all towards anybody, nothing but love and compassion. So if we can accept that, then think about how the Buddha sees that person. And then, if we respect the Buddha, admire the Buddha, have devotion to the Buddha, shouldn't we also try to like that person and at least not harm them, not have negative feelings for them, but try to be open to them in the same way the Buddha does? And also, if we were to get angry at that person and hurt them in some way, how would the Buddha feel? Would the Buddha be happy about that? Probably not. So that's another contemplation we can use to generate feelings of fondness towards others. And then the 5th reason is, next slide. The 5th reason is just as benefiting and harming our spiritual mentors, our teachers, brings happiness or suffering respectively, so does helping and harming sentient beings. So the verse says, in this way, since benefiting and harming are the respective causes of immeasurable happiness and suffering, sentient beings are also my gurus. So the commentary in the book, volume 5, says, we create virtuous and non-virtuous karma in dependence on the recipients of our actions. So when we do actions, most of our actions are in relation to others, other people, other beings. And some of our actions are non-virtuous, negative. So we create bad karma, like when we kill or steal or lie or insult or whatever. Then we create non-virtuous karma, and that's the cause of suffering. But we can also create virtuous karma in relation to others by not killing, not stealing, and so on, refraining from harmful actions, and instead of that, doing beneficial things, treating them with kindness, helping them when they need help, and so on. So probably most of the virtuous and non-virtuous actions that we create are in relation to others. And those others can include spiritual teachers, those who teach us the Dharma. And they are considered very special objects of our actions. In the teachings on karma, not all karma is the same. There's various factors that make some karma heavier and other karma lighter. And one of those factors is the object in relation to which we do an action. And if the object is a person who's been very kind to us and helpful to us, then that person is a more powerful object for the creation of karma, both virtuous and non-virtuous. So that would include people like our parents, and so kind to us, and our teachers, spiritual teachers as well as other teachers. So anybody who's really shown us a lot of kindness and been really helpful to us. So if we do something virtuous towards that person, then that virtue is greater than if we were to do it to a stranger, someone who hasn't shown us so much kindness. And the same is true for non-virtue. If we do something non-virtuous, like we tell lies or we insult them or hurt them in some way, then that kind of action is heavier. the karma is heavier than if we do it to a stranger, someone who hasn't helped us. So spiritual teachers, parents, and so on are considered powerful objects for our karma, the karma we create. And here in particular it mentions spiritual teachers. So spiritual mentors are powerful fields of merit for us because of their spiritual qualities and because of their kindness in leading us on the path. For that reason, we create enormous merit by offering material possessions and service to them. So making offerings to them and paying respect to them. We create a lot of merit. But on the other hand, if we get angry at our spiritual teachers, we criticize them, we insult them, or physically abuse them, then we create a huge amount of non-virtuous karma. So we have to be very careful about the kind of karma we create with spiritual teachers. And the situation is similar with respect to ordinary sentient beings. They have been our parents, our friends, our dear companions in previous lives, and even as strangers doing their job in society, they have benefited us greatly. So farmers producing the food that we eat, the people who deliver our mail and our internet, and so on, our water, electricity. Right? So there's so many people and beings out there that help us. And so when we do things that are positive and virtuous in relation to them, then we create good karma, and that's the cause of happiness. But when we do things that are negative to them, we harm them, do negative actions to them, then that becomes the cause of suffering in the future. So Nagarjuna is saying, so in this way, sentient beings are like our spiritual mentors, our spiritual teachers. So those are the 5 reasons why we should cherish sentient beings. I'll go through them again. The first one is that we and all sentient beings are the same in wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer. The second reason is that we and all sentient beings are like family because we have experienced all the joys and all the suffering of samsara together many, many, many times. And the third is that we've all been each other's parents and children, so we've had that really intimate relationship, parent and child, with every other being, not just once, but many times. And the fourth reason is because of the Buddha. The Buddha worked really hard to help sentient beings and has love and compassion for sentient beings. And if we contemplate that, then it also doesn't make sense to have negative feelings towards them, anger towards some or indifference towards others. And then the last one is, just as benefiting our spiritual teachers is the cause of much happiness and harming them is the cause of a lot of suffering, the same is true for our behavior in relation to sentient beings. So we can create the cause for happiness, or we can create the cause for suffering in relation to spiritual in relation to sentient beings. So they are like our spiritual teachers, our gurus. And then the next few verses seem to elaborate on that particular point by giving examples of the kinds of sufferings that come from harming sentient beings, and then the kinds of good results that come from helping them. So verse 7 says the Sugata, the term Sugata is another term for Buddha. So it's like saying the Buddha said, in this life, experiencing the sufferings of getting murdered, beaten, held hostage, threatened, and so on, These are the result of maltreating sentient beings. So, I don't know, well, none of us have experienced being murdered, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But we may have had the experience of some of these other things, like being beaten or held hostage or threatened and so on. So there's a kind of extreme cases of, bad things that can happen in our life. But we do hear stories of people having these experiences. I remember hearing about this man who lived in New York City, and he'd been mugged like 60 times or something like that. And I know other people who live in New York City but never got mugged. Yeah. So, there could be various factors like where you live, but one woman I knew, she did live in a rather rough neighborhood, but never had any kind of problem like that. So it makes you wonder, well, why? Why do these bad things happen to certain people and then they don't happen to other people? So the Buddhist answer to that is karma. So the bad things that happen to us and to others is the result of harm that we did in the past. And even if we haven't had these kind of experiences yet in our life, that doesn't mean we never did any harmful things in our past life. It's quite possible that we did do harmful things to other sentient beings in previous lives, and the karma is there, but it just hasn't ripened yet. And so it could ripen. That's why it's good to do 35 Buddhas every day, just think, or Vajrasattva, or whatever purification practice. And really think, accept that even if you haven't done anything really horrible in this lifetime, but there's a good chance that you did do horrible things in past lives. Because again, we've done everything. We've been everywhere, done everything. And so I accept that. It's hard to accept. It may take a while to accept it, but I think it's true. When I look at my mind and what's going on in my mind sometimes, I can accept, yes, I have done some awful things before. And the potential is there to do those again. If you're in the right circumstances, then those kind of impulses could arise and you could find yourself doing horrible things again. I definitely don't want that to happen. So it's good to think, okay, I did bad things before and I want to purify that karma and never do those things again. And the next verse is continuing with that. Physical and non-physical harm, being destitute of an inferior caste and having a short life. I think caste should have an E on it. Caste, like the caste system, yeah. Not like the cast of a play, an inferior caste. And having a short life, one's spouse dying, becoming blind. So these are just more examples of unfortunate things that can happen to us, and maybe we have had some of these. Probably have had some of these already happening to us, and these are all the result of having harmed sentient beings. So when these things happen to us, or if we hear about or read about in the news these kind of things happening to others, then this is further material to contemplate with regard to karma, that these experiences happen as a result of harmful actions to sentient beings and other kinds of beings like spiritual teachers, Buddhas, and so on. And the next verse is also about the adverse results of negative karma, harming others. Experiencing the different types of sufferings on each level of the lower realms down to a Vici hell, that is all from my fault of having harmed sentient beings. So Buddhist texts describe different levels of unfortunate rebirths in the different realms, the lower realms, animal realm, hungry ghost, and then in hell there's a number of different hells, and a Vichy hell is the worst. That's where the suffering is the greatest of all. And so where do those sufferings come from? Why is it that there are those different realms? They were not created by anybody, not like a god, like a creator who created those places, but rather they are created by sentient beings' karma, negative karma. So Shantideva says something about that, like who created the burning iron ground in hell? Who created the monsters who are causing you suffering in hell? These are created by our own mind. So it's our own mind that gets totally caught up in some afflictions, especially hatred and cruelty, hostility, aggressiveness, wanting to harm others. Especially that state of mind, I think, is the cause of those terrible sufferings in hell. And what he says here is those sufferings arise from having harmed sentient beings. So if we ever get caught up in such feelings of hatred and harmfulness, aggressiveness, and do things that are harmful to others, then we are creating the cause to have those kinds of experiences. So it's important to really try our best not to perpetuate feelings of anger and hatred, even if they seem justified. Someone has really caused us suffering, or they cause suffering to others that we care about. Anger may arise, hostility may arise, thoughts of harming them may arise, but we have to be very clear that if we were to entertain those thoughts, feed them, follow them, act them out, we're just creating the cause of horrible experiences in the future. They can be purified, of course. It said there's no karma that's so bad that it can't be purified. But better not to create them in the first place, rather than think, okay, I'll just go and murder somebody and then I'll do Vajrasattva afterwards. Yeah, no guarantee that you will be able to completely purify that karma, and there might still be some residue that you'll have to experience if we can't control ourselves. One time Lama Yeshe said, sometimes delusions, afflictions come up really, really, really strong in your mind, and you just can't, control it, and you just get carried away like on a wave and act it out. He said, if that happens, if you really can't stop yourself, then you can't help it, but you can purify afterwards. I don't think he was giving us a license to just act out our afflictions, but just know that, okay, if that happens, you can always purify. You can purify afterwards. So it's not like the end of the world and you have to just, kill yourself because you did such a terrible thing. So I don't know. For me, that was helpful to hear. Because, our afflictions can sometimes be so strong, and we try so hard to curb them, control them, but sometimes it's just very hard. So there is always that practice of purification. Okay, any questions so far?
Yeah, and number 8, correct me, but it seems like where it says being destitute of an inferior caste and having a short life, one spouse dying, that seems to infer that somebody else's karma influences somebody else's life.
That's a good point. Yeah, people wonder about that sometimes. Like, close family member, close friend, or child were to die, is that my karma? Is it my karma that they died in an untimely way. I think it is mainly the other person's karma, because they say karma can't be transferred from one person to another. It's not possible to, the karma we create results in our experiences, the karma others create results in their experiences, and it can't be switched, transferred. So if a person, whether it's your child or your spouse or your friend or whatever, if they die at a certain time, especially if it's an early death, an untimely death, that, my understanding is, that is their karma. It's their karma to die at that time. But perhaps what he means here is that we do have the karma. It would be our karma to lose somebody. Yeah? To lose a loved one in an untimely way. Maybe that's what he means. Any other ideas? Any other thoughts about that? Yeah, so of course we grieve. There's the suffering of grief when we lose a loved one. Whenever we have a close relationship, or any relationship with somebody else, there has to be a karma. We have some kind of karma to be together in that particular life. And so if you have a karma to be married to somebody or to be a partner with somebody, that's quite a close karma. So I would think that if they die at the age of 40 or whatever, that's their karma to die. It's kind of an early death. That would be their karma, not my karma. It's not my karma that caused them to die at that age. But there's still our karma to lose that person, to have a spouse, to have a partner who dies at such a young age. And I'm just guessing. I haven't really heard an explanation of this, but it's just my guess. Venerable Kunga?
I would think how much grief they experience over it, how distressed they are. If they're able to just put it in a bigger picture and move on with their life, then, they may not have harmed sentient beings so much in a previous life, but if they're completely devastated and they can't get over it, and the suffering just goes on and on. Because I met someone who, she was like in her early 20s, and she had just gotten married, and then her husband died from some heart problem, and that's all she ever talked about. And she didn't seem to be able to move past that. So I think that's an example of, having harmed someone in a previous life, and that ripens. Whereas other people, they just move on and it's okay.
Yeah, so you're saying that the extent of the suffering one has as a result of losing the spouse, that would be affected by your karma, determined by your karma. Yeah, I haven't really heard specific explanation of that. And when I read through this verse, I didn't really think about it. So it's a good point. But yeah, usually losing a loved one, especially your spouse or your child or something, is pretty painful.
Yes, I have some thoughts on 7 and 8 that are coming up around the language in it. It makes me feel like it could be so easily distorted, that language, and then really turned into societies that, like in India, that are really inequitable. Like, it could be so quickly distorted from let's have compassion for all beings because these things are happening to them due to karma, to these people deserve it and therefore deserve to exist in said caste or to have a short life, and then lead to less compassion for them. So just curious about the language.
Well, I remember this text would have been written 2,000 years ago or something. And the caste system still exists in India, even though, there are attempts to equalize people, but it's very difficult. So it's still very much there. And and so if there is a caste system and you are born into an inferior caste as opposed to a superior caste, then what's the cause of that? And I mean, here in America, we don't have a formal caste system, but I think every society has some kind of caste system where there are certain people who are on the top, millionaires, the billionaires, the celebrities, and then people down at the bottom, born into impoverished families that may have very little chance of ever improving their situation. So, I mean, it kind of exists almost everywhere. And so, yeah, if we ask, well, what would be the cause of that? What would be the cause of being born into the Rockefeller family as opposed to being born in a family that's, living in a slum and facing all kinds of difficulties? If that isn't attributed to karma, that's not the result of karma, then how do you explain that? I don't think Nagarjuna is trying to justify caste system and things like that, but they exist. It's something that exists. It's part of human nature, human society, to have these different groups of people with different kinds of experiences. And if that's the fact, that's the reality, and we take birth into one or another type of family or situation, then how do we account for that?
Thank you. Two things. One, there's a really great book called Caste that Isabel Wilkerson wrote about the American caste system. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian. It's incredible to kind of dig into that. If sort of race and inequity is sort of a topic you read about, it's an incredible book. But I had been taught that it's not good to try and correlate, to think you know enough about karma to correlate an action to a reaction, that it's so big and it goes over so many lifetimes that to go down the rabbit hole of trying to pinpoint, well, that person obviously, that it's so much more profound than that, just working with with compassion and not trying to sort the cards on who got what for what reason, because there's always something coming down the road for us if we're however karma ripens. And so that has always for me been helpful to think of that way.
Yeah, and the whole point here is not to point our finger at other people and say, oh, you were born in this miserable situation, you must have done something really bad. But we're looking at our own mind and what are the results of our actions. So if we act in ways that are harmful to others, we, cause them suffering, then these are the results that we will experience in the future if we don't purify. So it's to motivate ourselves to do our best to refrain from harmful actions so we don't have these experiences.
Do you know why it's called the Avicii hell?
What?
Do you know why it's called the Avicii hell?
Oh, Avicii.
And what Avicii means?
Oh, I know. I can look it up. But it's like unrelenting suffering. It has some kind of connotation like that, just like continuous, the worst kind of suffering without a break, no break. So I don't like to think too much about that one. It's enough for me to know that bad things will happen to me if I do bad things, and I'll just try to avoid those. I don't want to know the details.
It's a Sanskrit word that means waveless.
Huh?
Waveless.
Waveless?
Meaning like relentless.
Yeah, instead of, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. Unrelenting, unwavering.
I remember that karma is one among 5 laws of nature. So if we tend to blame karma on own the thing, I don't feel comfortable about that, because there are many causes and conditions that make something happen. So if we all say, hey, this is karma, I don't feel comfortable, I'm not convinced to to accept that.
Yeah, this is true. There are many factors, causes and conditions, but karma is one of them. And karma is related to sentient beings. So like what happens in nature, earthquakes and so on, that isn't, well, I mean, some Buddhists would say that's related to the karma of sentient beings. If sentient beings have the karma to have earthquakes and fires and so on, then those things happen. But this is very, very difficult to explain how it actually works. And in I think it's volume 3, Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, Nature, there's one chapter in there where His Holiness attempts to explain the relationship between karma of sentient beings and then things that happen in the universe. But he does say as well that karma is not the only factor, many other factors as well, like just natural causes and conditions. Okay, I'd like to talk about a couple more verses, because the next couple of verses are talking about pleasant things. Nice to end on a pleasant note rather than on all the awful things that happen. So verse 10, it says, offerings being made to oneself, being esteemed, attractive, having wealth, those come through never maltreating pleasant or unpleasant sentient beings. Okay, so here we're talking about if we have respect for sentient beings and we really make an effort to not do anything harmful to them, then these are some of the results that we have. We receive gifts and offerings. We're not going to be hungry and destitute and deprived of things. So that really happens here. We receive so many offerings. And so we must have done beneficial things in past life and in this life as well. And then, being respected by others, having an attractive appearance. And having an attractive appearance isn't something we should aspire for its own sake. But for a bodhisattva, it's useful to have an attractive appearance because you want to help people. You want to make connections with others and influence them in a positive way and have them listen to you and so on. And if you're really ugly or scary looking, then that could interfere with your ability to connect with others and help others. So, and they say the cause of having an attractive appearance, or at least not a horrible appearance, is patience, the practice of patience, learning to manage anger, not just get angry and act it out. And then wealth. Again, we don't need to be wealthy, rich, but having enough so that our needs are taken care of. And then if we have extra, we can share that with others. We can use our extra wealth to practice generosity, help others. So these are positive results that are helpful even for bodhisattvas, those who want to follow the spiritual path and reach enlightenment. Then it's good to have these results, and these come from not harming others. And it goes on the next verse, being free of disease, of an excellent caste, handsome, rich, powerful, having a long life, wealth, and so on, and a special spouse. Well, we don't have to aspire for that. For some people, that's really important to have a partner in life to enjoy your life with. These are the result of benefiting sentient beings. Okay, so again, we're talking about our karma, our behavior, our actions, and if we refrain from harming sentient beings and benefit them as much as we can, then these are the results that we will experience. Then next verse says, through being fond of sentient beings, one will attain kingdoms, great kingdoms, perfect kingdoms of the sublime wheel turner and the dominions of power. So that might sound a little strange, like, maybe you never thought about wanting a kingdom. But they do talk about that in the traditional teachings, that as a result of especially powerful, virtuous karma, good karma, then you do create the cause to be in positions of leadership. And, if you're a bodhisattva or an aspiring bodhisattva, then that's something you might aspire to, because if you are in the position of leadership, you have other people listening to you, paying attention to you, and you have the ability to make laws and so forth, then you can do a lot of good. Like King Ashoka, one of the great kings in India, who actually united India. India was just a bunch of independent, individual little states, and he united it, not in a very nice way, I have to say. In the beginning, he was quite, kind of a warlord. But then he changed. He became a Buddhist, and then just did so much good for people. He did all these, he built things that would benefit people, and he built temples and monasteries where people could learn the Dharma, and did all kinds of things to support the practice of Dharma. So if you are in a position of leadership like that, then there's a lot of good that you can do to benefit others. And the result, and the karma to be in such a situation is caring about sentient beings, being kind to sentient beings. Then 13, through benefiting sentient beings, one also attains the state of a Buddha. What is marvelous about someone attaining the insignificant state of an inferior celestial being? So the highest goal or result of benefiting sentient beings is becoming a Buddha, becoming fully awakened, fully enlightened. And attaining that state means one has unlimited ability to help each and every sentient being with incredible wisdom and compassion and the ability to manifest in different forms and teach them according to what's suitable for them. So that's the highest goal, the highest result of benefiting sentient beings. And the last two lines, I think he's probably addressing this to some people who, like in India, there were and still are today people whose goal is to be born as a deva, as a celestial being. These live in realms that are higher than our realm, human realm. So they have more pleasure, longer lives, less suffering, and so some people aspire, like wanting to be born in heaven. Many people want to be born in heaven. That's their goal. But from the Buddhist point of view, that's just another rebirth in samsara. It's temporary, it doesn't last. You are born there as a result of good karma, virtue, but while you're there having all these enjoyments, your good karma runs out, and then you're left with no more good karma, unless you create some during your life, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you just spend your whole life enjoying yourself. And then you get to the end of your life and you don't have any more good karma, you may have the bad karma that's still there in your mind, and so you can fall from that state to an unfortunate one. So Buddhism really emphasizes that is not something to aspire for. It's considered an inferior state, especially compared to awakening, Buddhahood, and nirvana. Okay, so I don't know if I should go on. The next set of verses is about how sentient beings help us in our practice to create virtue, in particular to practice the 6 perfections. So, yeah, I'll do those tomorrow. I think we can finish the text tomorrow. It's not very long. Yeah, and if there's anything in this text or anything you encounter in the traditional teachings that you find doesn't make sense to you, or maybe even offensive, or you don't feel comfortable about it, just put it on the back burner. Or you could also contemplate it. Try to think, well, why is that teaching there? Who is it addressed to? What's the purpose of it? So try to find a way of managing it, because the teachings are given for so many different people, different mentalities, and so on. And some of these verses might be just perfect for certain people, just what they need to help them. But for us, again, it's a very different time, very different culture. And maybe some of them may seem inappropriate for our culture and our time, but understand that for another time and other people, then these verses would have been very helpful, very suitable.
I found that when Venerable started teaching these years ago on the Shantarakshita's story about this whole idea about results and causes of why things happen to us, and then her book, Good Karma, I found that it was extremely helpful to get me out of my victim thinking and my blaming thinking, because that it brought home to me that even though karma is an extremely hidden phenomena, the substantial causes of a lot what happens to me is something that I create myself, and that they're concomitant. I mean, it's ethical conduct, it's refraining. So I found that it helped me to step out of my poor me and somebody else is doing this to me and I'm an innocent bystander of my own suffering. So it's got a big cause around it, but I sure found it extremely helpful, empowering my own practice of purification.
Yeah. So you found a way of relating to these ideas that was beneficial for you. Yeah. I think that's good. I try to do that as well. When I encounter something in the teachings that kind of rubs me the wrong way, then I use that to, look at my mind. Why am I feeling this way? And I usually find a way of figuring it out so that I can make it work for me. Yeah. Okay, so let's dedicate the merit, the positive energy,